It's the Cavaliers Basketball Club Podcast.
It's basketball time at the Cube.
It's over! It's over! The 52-year drought is over! The Cavaliers have won the NBA championship! Cleveland, this is for you!
Mitchell
Goes to the basket and buries Cornette.
Garland high steps over the timeline, stumps on a dime, hits the three. Darius Garland has been unreal here in the fourth quarter. Shot clock down to 5. Lillard blocked by Mobley. Oh my! Take his home. Challenge Allen, and Allen said no.
get that big stuff out of here.
The shoot around.
Welcome back to the show. The Cavs have been on a tear, winning the last 7 of 8. We knew it was going to be a tough stretch, but they made it look easy. Most recently, they won 5 and 7 nights, beating the Wizards, Pistons, Pelicans, Bulls, and Spurs. Fans of the pod will note that we predicted this could be the case. Unfortunately, they managed to fall back to earth last night, losing to the 76ers in Philly 112-118. On top of all this, it just broke that Kevin Love has requested a buyout from the team, and it could have already happened by the time this recording has been released. Colin, we talked last week about the Cavs keeping him around in spite of the fact they've been having success without him. We've wondered aloud for years whether he should be traded. But a buyout? Why now?
Adam, I'm still a little bit shell-shocked. On one hand, I'm really glad the team has won 7 of their last 8 games. They've really looked good. They're clearly clicking. And I was really pleased that JB and Love were able to have an adult conversation about his play. So I always thought that Love would remain with the team this season and even in the next season. But obviously he wants to move on, and the team will do its best to make the playoffs without him.
Please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or follow us on the podcast player of your choice. We are also adding extra content to our YouTube channel, so please subscribe. And please be sure to leave a comment. We'd love for you to engage with the club.
Well, buddy, when I was writing this outline out, we were going to initially discuss KD leaving Brooklyn. But now I think it's best that we chat about Kevin Love asking for this buyout. I mentioned I'm a little shell-shocked. What about you? Do you think they will sign a replacement?
Kevin Love, wow. You know, we've been talking about it throughout the entire season, that there's been a little bit of the writing on the wall. We've wondered if this could happen. Didn't really expect it to, especially because it sounded like both parties were happy with the way things are, and that Love eventually would come back from whatever hiccup he was having, probably back spasms or the shooting hand, the thumb injury that we've been hearing about. Apparently, it's not so much that. It's that the Cavaliers have decided that they don't really have room for him in their rotation anymore. They've moved on from him, and he has decided that he would like another shot to win a ring then on another team. And not just a chance to be on a team that could win another ring, because this team could win one this year. I mean, I don't think we will, but we do have a shot.
Yeah.
And it's kind of surprising to me that both sides are like, yeah, probably not here. So ultimately, Kevin is deciding that there's still tread left on the tires, that gas left in the tank, you know, whatever car analogy you want to come up with here, that he's not done yet. I guess good for him. It's sad to see Kevin Love not finish his career as a Cavalier. And also considering that he had such amazing value last year as a sixth man on a team that clearly wasn't going to go very far. I wish we had traded him last year when he had more value and we could have gotten something for him. But this is the nature of the NBA, part of the business. And bon voyage, man. Thanks for the times you were out there playing. You know, there's been a lot of seasons in the last 4 or 5 years that we didn't really get to see you in a Cavs uniform. So I think that's been the saddest part of it all. We didn't really get to see him play much when LeBron and Kyrie left. So how about you? What do you think about all this?
Yeah, it is kind of odd that he's kind of leaving stage right through the back door. It's kind of the NBA version of the Irish goodbye at a party, in the sense that, you know, Chris Fedor had reported he was wanting to do this, he made this known right before the Philadelphia game. Gee, I wonder why the rest of the players came out flat. His propensity to be on the floor has always been lacking. His ability to be a great player at times has always been there. He definitely is one of the best Cavaliers ever, but he's also his career has been kind of strange with the Cavaliers. He will always be known as the guy who was able to stop Curry in the final game 7 of their championship run. He'll be known for a lot of his skill sets and whatnot, but he also is a bit of an enigma. He is a personality where, he didn't gel with the locker room when he initially came here. He thought that he would be more of the man once LeBron and Kyrie left, but he could never get on the floor. So his career really is very unique. And because it's lasted longer than we all thought he would, there were rumors he was going to get traded into that first season when he was acquired by the Cavs from Minnesota. And ultimately, I do respect his game and who he is on the floor and what he's done outside of the game. I just think there are times when he has made decisions or done things that have kind of gotten in his own way, and I think this is kind of one of those times. He could have announced this not on the same day as a game. He could have made this known during the trade deadline, and instead, for whatever reason, he waited. But I'm not surprised by that on some level, because that's just kind of how Kevin Love rolls. And I do hope that he is able to play a little bit more for another team. I just hope it's not against us in some playoff fashion and he goes off for 30 points or something from 3. I would assume that I don't think that'll happen, but that would kind of be a bummer.
It does make you wonder if he has some bad blood with Danny Green, but I don't...
Yeah, exactly.
Ultimately, though, I would say... Yeah, he's coming? Forget it. I want out. But ultimately, I also, 4 or 5 days ago, you had Kobe Altman saying, no, we're not, there's no buyout talk. Mm-hmm. Both sides are happy with this situation. So this must have been an 11th hour decision on Kevin Love's part. Yeah. And it'll be very interesting if the Cavaliers will ever kind of make known how blindsided they were by this decision. But ultimately, them getting rid of him in this way and knowing that the Celtics, the Heat, these people are looking to pick him up, they must not be that worried about what these teams are going to do with him. And I'm sorry, Kevin, that doesn't look very good on you. I know that we've seen other players like Blake Griffin, for example, leave the Pistons and then go have a little bit of a second coming with the Nets. But yeah, I don't see Kevin coming off of a bench doing anything differently for any other team than what he was able to do for us, if he's able to play at all.
Yeah.
Colin, as we opened the show, we mentioned that the Cavs are on a complete and utter tear going into the All-Star break. What are you seeing from this team at this point in the season compared to last season? Besides Mitchell, what players are standing out to you?
I think you and I are both very happy with how the Cavs' first half of the season is going right now. I think when we compare it to last season, there are a lot of differences, especially with having Donovan Mitchell, but a big similarity is that they still are relying on their defense to dictate the game. They are making sure that their opponent feels their physicality, that their defensive scheme is extremely sound. They're, I think, even better on some level this year in how they're communicating, especially with their guards, and how you can tell between Donovan and Darius when they're on the floor together, they actually are communicating well in respect to which matchups and who should come off screens and whatnot. And I think a big thing that is different compared to last year is I think there is more stability with this team from the starters. There have been still a ton of injuries, which is also the same as last year, But this year, I think that with how Okoro has come along and provided that stability in the sense of actually hitting an outside shot, not only just hitting an outside shot, but putting the ball on the floor and doing some great work with his passing ability and getting to the rim, you can just tell the starters feel comfortable in this last stretch of 10 to 12 games where Okoro has been starting at the small forward. They all just kind of understand, all right, this is our bread and butter lineup. We know that we can out-physical anyone when you have Jarrett Allen, Isaac Okoro, and then Evan Mobley, who they can all shut down any given player that they're matched up on. The other guy, I highlighted Okoro. The other guy I'll highlight real quick here is Evan Mobley. I mean, you and I, we had an episode about his kind of coming out game a couple of weeks ago where people just loved it. I mean, we had more listens and downloads of that episode than we've had in this entire podcast, this short run of a podcast, because he clearly is a superstar. He is someone who is not only defensively just a freak of nature because of how he is able to impact the game on that side, he is now hitting some type of stride offensively, and it's in him understanding what to do in the post, what types of shots he has in his bag that he knows are completely unguardable. He is a second-year player who is going out there and putting the moves and beating the you-know-what out of 5-6-year starters at the center and power forward position because they have no way of staying in front of him, all while on top of all of that, while basically weighing, as much as you and I. So Evan Mobley, I think, is really the biggest difference between last year and this year, his maturation. So, the question said, besides Mitchell, I'm going to take Mobley.
Last season, we've talked about this. The glaring differences are going to be Mitchell all day long. There's really hardly anything else to point to. I know that Mobley is starting to take that step, but it wasn't that many episodes ago that I was asking if it was going to happen this season, if maybe he was having a sophomore slump.
Yeah.
And I know that that's only because I thought he was going to take a larger leap coming into this year. And we've talked about why. The team offensively, I think, has struggled most nights to not just sit back and watch Mitchell the way that previous Cavs teams had a hard time not sitting back and watching LeBron just go off. With all of that being said, I think that, it's tough for me to dissect how else we're different. So I would just say that how we have changed over these last 7 or 8 games is really where my head has been. Because I think other than enjoying the Mitchell experience and now being a part of the NBA conversation every night, I was starting to be a little stale on that and wondering when we were going to figure out how to be a cohesive team together. That it wasn't going to be these nights of just seeing us figure out how to win in the last second. It's great that we're one of the best fourth quarter teams in the league, if not still the best. But I've been frustrated to watch us really not figure it out until the second half. And last 6-7 games, really 6 out of the last 7 games, they were starting to figure that out. They've come out very strong in the first half. They haven't needed to come back from a huge deficit going into the fourth quarter, except for that 76ers game. I kind of just went through these last 6 games and made some quick notes, because I think that, to me, the notes will explain to you what I think are the differences, at least from what we've seen in the first 20-some games of the season, and now these last almost 20 games or so. So we're looking at, with the Pacers game, we had 5 guys in double figures. Okoro had 20 points. Allen was 18 points, 13 rebounds, and Mobley 17 points and 10 rebounds. And they shot 40% from 3 with 33 assists. In the Wizards game, they had 6 guys in double figures. Allen had 23 points and 8 rebounds. Garland and Mitchell with 28 minutes total for the game, which I thought was interesting. They really managed their minutes well that night. And then 48% from 3, 58 points in the paint. Now, this is just what the Cavs did. I didn't really highlight the Wizards stats or any of these other team stats. I just kind of was focusing on what was good for us. The Pistons game, 5 guys in double figures, 1 without Mitchell or Garland on the court. Allen had 20 points, 16 boards, Neto with 14, and they had 30 assists in that game. 30 assists without Garland or Mitchell playing. I thought that was huge. Then you have the Pelicans game, 5 guys in double figures. Bulls game, 4 guys in double figures. Spurs game, 4 guys in double figures. Like, every game, they're figuring out how to at least get their starters or maybe one guy off the bench involved enough that they're easily acquiring the points needed to win these games. Mm-hmm. And as you stated so heavily in your answer, defensively, they have remained a top 5 team all year long. Mm-hmm. So we talked about how, was it their defense that was lacking or was something else going on? And we did see that, well, they're contesting 3-point shots, they're contesting things, but they're just those things are just falling. And so eventually, when teams stop being so lucky against us, we were going to start seeing more wins. And I think that's what happened. We had a streak of luck where we played some teams with losing records, and we were just able to kind of bring it together in that stretch. So what I'm excited about is just in this last week or two, we've seen the Cavaliers finally start to solidify what they're supposed to be heading into the postseason. And that's very important because these next couple of months are going to go by extremely fast after the All-Star break.
Yeah.
As far as, I'll just end on my thought on this, and if you have any follow-up, we'll move on to the second question, because my answer to this one is I'm looking at Okoro and I'm looking at Allen. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Okoro. He's been consistent at 3. He's back up to almost his 35% from 3, which he had last season, which is his highest percentage total in his career. I think that Okoro has quietly become reliable enough from the outside that they can use him in the starting 5 more frequently. Mm-hmm. And on the nights that he's had 12 points or more, that's really all you need from him. So I'd like to see him get a little more points moving forward, but his consistency in his shot is finally there. And his defense has always been stellar, and they're really doing a great job with him there. And then with Allen, we're going to move into the second question there. But, I mean, I mentioned him several times on the stats that I read out. You've got most nights he was in double figures or flirting with a double-double. So he's been a huge part of our ability to stabilize things and right the ship in this last stretch of games.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all excellent points, and I think what you're also seeing in our answer is the team is just taking another evolutionary step. Kobe and JB understood that they needed to get a guy like Donovan Mitchell for the team to progress. And it's not, they don't have the luxury of surprising anyone this year. And the organization understood from a holistic standpoint, hey, we need to make sure that we have at least one guy out there on the floor who can get a bucket whenever he wants at any moment's notice. And that's what they did in getting Donovan. And I think that allows the rest of the team to start unlocking and then progress from what we're seeing, especially in the stretch of games where you're having not only Okoro and Allen and Mobley and even Jetty, you're seeing a little bit of a difference in their confidence on the floor, which I think is helping everyone. And having a player like Donovan Mitchell, we talked about it a lot, is just having that guy out on the court and even on your bench when he's not healthy brings a confidence to a player and a team. Since the Miami game, Jarrett Allen has been averaging just under 20 points a game and 11.4 rebounds. We talked last week about how he was a little underwhelming this year. What are you seeing from the man in the middle in these last 7 to 8 games that is standing out?
Well, we touched base a little bit on it in the last question, but I'm seeing consistency. I'm seeing solid play from a big that most nights, like you said, is giving me almost 20 and 12 on a team with Donovan Mitchell and Mobley and others that, that's just icing on the cake when you know that you've got your center able to come out there and give that to you. And we've noted ever since we picked him up, really, the way that Allen's presence on the court changes our ability to be the defensive force that we are. And so even though we're highlighting offensive stats, really to me, what he gives us in the middle every night, whether he's scoring or not, is one of the reasons why we're one of the best defensive teams in the league. And, that's a no-brainer when obviously you pair him next to Mobley and they're the Block brothers, or whatever you want to call them. That hasn't really come to as much fruition as we thought it would. But the NBA doesn't play under the basket as much as they used to. So there's not as many opportunities for blocks when you stop and really think about it, considering so many threes are taken nowadays. I think I've been the most impressed over this last stretch by Allen because he's just kind of quietly going out there and doing it. And I get the feeling like on a lesser team, Allen could be a 30 and 15 guy a night. I think that even on this team, he could be that if he was more selfish about what his offensive output or what his superstar role is supposed to be. And maybe that's me placing more of a thought on that simply because he took a 5-year, $100 million deal with us when he clearly could have gotten a lot more money. And I have a feeling that Allen will probably continue to make those kinds of decisions for the rest of his career because I think he's a team-first kind of player. So I'm just seeing probably one of the most important leaders on this team step up and start to give us the offensive output that we require to match his defensive output. And I think that if we can continue to see him play this way moving into the playoffs, we have a really good chance of moving into the second round and beyond. Because with Allen playing consistently like this, you can really envision us winning just about any 7-series game that you're going to play against most teams that we're going to be facing. So it just kind of amps up that expectation in my own mind of what we could even achieve this year. And we've talked about it throughout this episode, but with Kevin Love now being bought out, it's just another example that this organization, that these coaches are ready to start leaning more heavily on the guys they've got and what is supposed to be the future of this organization. So even with Love being gone, we don't have a ton of bigs on this team, and Danny Green's not going to fill that role. So I would expect that you're going to see even more play coming from Allen and Mobley moving forward. So what do you think?
I think on that note, I wouldn't be surprised if the team still went out and got a 4 who can at least provide a few minutes to get Allen and Mobley some rest. But I also think you're hitting the nail on the head there in respect to Allen is just that type of player. He's that consistent force in the middle who is going to put up good numbers, not, amazing numbers, but numbers that they put them over the top because everybody is focusing on our guards and Mobley for certain possessions. And then you have to deal with Jarrett Allen, who really, I would argue, is probably a top 3 center in the East. You have Embiid. Giannis is not a center. Giannis is a freak of nature. And there are some other solid centers in the East, but I really can't name a bunch right now. I think that Allen really is a top 3 center. He has his certain skill set. He's an impeccable pick and roll center. But I've also noticed from this stretch of games, they're utilizing his shot in different ways. He's having to hit a few more floaters. He's hitting a couple more, I would kind of call them like half hook shots, because it allows Garland and Donovan to get into the paint in kind of a different angle, so the paint is not getting clogged up as much if Allen's hitting a shot from 10 to 12 feet away, which he's being asked to do, and then that opens up the paint area more. And I think that's the thing that is really intriguing about him, is he has steadily improved his offensive game in small ways just to execute better. And he's talked about that in media days and stuff like that. But really, it's the small details. It's the granular changes to his offensive game. You know, him moving his shoulder a certain way, or him placing his body in a certain position that allows him to get to the basket in a different angle, and it opens up the offense even more. And yeah, as you mentioned, we're talking about his offense a lot, and that's still downplaying the fact that he is an elite center defensively. He is their anchor on defense, and I would never want to face a man like that in the middle. A lot of people don't want to go up against him. And so when you have that already in the can, his defensive ability, and you put on top of that his willingness, as you mentioned, to be a team player, to just improve on the smallest scale, to understand that that's the greatest impact offensively, is just awesome. We were elated when we got him, and I'll always be impressed by him in how he plays the game of basketball, and how he's always willing to put his teammates first and try to do the best for the Cavaliers. It's just awesome to see.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for the organization, I think, to acknowledge that Kobe Altman made such an amazing trade for Allen, because people are going to just remember that all of the players that Kobe's been able to assemble over the last several years, Allen to me was the piece that made us a future contender. Mm-hmm. And I know Mitchell obviously takes us over the top, but the minute we got Allen, that was basically when we went, all right, well, let's do a podcast, let's get going, because this team is going to be amazing, And we had kind of started, but we knew we were in for a long haul once we saw that they got this guy. So if you like our podcast, Jarrett, it's your fault, and if you don't like it, it's your fault.
Yeah.
The final seconds.
Adam, before our recording, you were mentioning that you got to work an event in your real-world job where you got to see former Cavalier Ben Wallace get inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame. What was it like? Do you have any fond memories of Ben Wallace playing as a Cavalier?
No, I really don't have hardly any memory at all of him playing. I had to look at his stats to see what year he was even on our team. And he played on the 07-08 and the 08-09 Cavaliers. And that was right, in those kind of weird dog day kind of years of like, okay, we're good, but we can't seem to get over the hump of Detroit. And, will LeBron really be able to win one with us? We did go to the finals the year before against the Spurs, but we got swept. And, yeah, those years were tough because there was a lot of hope, but it was usually crushed pretty easily. So that's what I remember. I remember the constant rotation in and out of players throughout the league, that if we could get them to come to the Cavs to play with LeBron. And, of course, he was another example of the, sadly, kind of on the way out of their prime of their careers when they would join to play with LeBron, which is one of the reasons why LeBron could never win one the first time around here. So Ben was a part of that. That's what I remember the most. I was not all that excited that he was coming to my job. I wasn't. It didn't matter that much to me, other than cool NBA player. But I gotta say, I was impressed by him. I thought that he's very humble about what it meant to have the career that he had at all, and that he felt that the institution that I work for. I mean, I might as well just say, I work for Tri-C. It's a community college in Northeast Ohio. And I think it's relevant to mention because he was inducted basically as a, I don't even know what they would call it, but they put his number up in the rafters because he is a special player for the history of Tri-C basketball. He played for 2 seasons for Tri-C in 1992 to 1994. And he actually did talk at great length about how important it was for him that he had the opportunity to play basketball here, and that if it wasn't for Tri-C seeing something in him, he was a football player prior and he'd never played basketball, but I think before he was 17, 18 years old, he'd never played. So he had a big learning curve, and the fact that he has been inducted in the Hall of Fame, he's the first undrafted player ever to be, that's a shocking statistic to me, because even though I know it's tough, I would have thought there'd be a few players by now. And I don't recall him playing to that level that, you just had to put him in there. But looking at his stats and seeing, what he was able to do as an undersized power forward center, he really belongs. And it was a real privilege to see him be celebrated and acknowledged for the fact that he started his career here in Northeast Ohio. He didn't have much to say about being a Cav, but he did say that it meant a lot to him that he was able to come back to the community that he got started in, and that he spent a lot of years here in the beginning trying to recruit people for the college and also trying to advance local youth and their opportunities. So just a good guy overall, and great to be celebrated for his achievements, and nice that he has a little bit of history here in Northeast Ohio. As we've mentioned, the Cavs didn't make any trades at the deadline, but they did sign former Cavalier Danny Green. Don't know if anybody remembers that he was a Cav, but he was. Are you expecting much from his signing?
I'm not expecting a ton from Danny Green at this point in his career. He's definitely a little long in the tooth compared to when we drafted him, when he was a young kid. But I am kind of curious to see how he pans out in respect to his shooting. He is a phenomenal shooter from the outside. He does a great job of working along the three-point arc to hit that outside shot and really provide spacing on the floor. And he's a threat, which we have Jetty, we have Isaac, we have Karras, and of those 4, including Green is by far the most consistent shooter of all of them. And that's kind of fun to see. We haven't really had a player like this probably since like when JR would get insanely hot. But again, JR would have to get insanely hot. And when he would, the great thing about JR is he would be hot for multiple games. It wasn't just the one game. Where Jetty, it's kind of like the one game. Usually, maybe a few. But with Green, he is a consistent outside shooter. And I think if anything, that's the biggest thing I'm expecting, is that he will provide some much needed space for a bit of an offensively challenged team moving into the second half of the season, which I like. And I'm hopeful that the Cavs will be able to utilize him in a few different ways. And it's kind of cool and exciting to have him back. I think he left kind of on a bitter note, and now hopefully he'll be able to make some amends and maybe hit some game-winning shots for us.
Thank you for listening to the Cavaliers Basketball Club podcast. Let's go Cavs!